The Medal of Honor felt heavier around my neck than the shrapnel in my chest ever did. I stood at the airline counter at Reagan National, watching this kid. Couldn't be more than 25, with his slicked hair and company smile. Tell me I was being bumped to economy. My first-class ticket to Washington, D.C. crumpled slightly in my weathered hands as I processed his words. "Sir, we have a VIP passenger who needs your seat. Company policy dictates we accommodate our platinum members first." The morning had started, badly enough. My arthritis was acting up from the December cold, and the cab driver had gotten lost twice trying to find the terminal. Now this. I adjusted my old baseball cap, the one with the faded MOH patch my granddaughter had sewn on last Christmas, and tried to keep my voice level. "Son," I interrupted, my voice carrying the weight of 40 years in uniform. "I'm flying to meet the President of the United States. This isn't a pleasure trip." He barely glanced at my ticket, didn't notice the patch on my cap, didn't see the scars that traced my jawline like a road map of forgotten battles in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. To him, I was just another old man causing problems. During the morning rush, "Rules are rules, sir. You're not the president." The words hit me like friendly fire, unexpected, devastating, and from someone who should have been on my side. Around us, Terminal C at Reagan National hummed with the usual pre-holiday chaos. Business travelers typing furiously on phones while juggling coffee and laptops. Families corralling overtired children loaded down with Disney backpacks. The endless stream of announcements echoing off the polished floors about delayed flights and gate changes. I thought about the letter in my coat pocket, handwritten on White House stationery in the president's own hand. "Colonel Danvers, your presence is requested at a ceremony honoring the forgotten heroes of Operation Desert Shield. Too many of our finest went unrecognized for too long. It's time to set the record straight." The president himself had called me personally last week, his voice carrying that familiar Texas drawl as he explained how important this ceremony was, not just for the families of the fallen, but for the country's healing. "Look," the kid continued, already turning to help the next passenger in line, dismissing me with the casual indifference of someone who'd never had to fight for anything more challenging than a parking spot. "There's nothing I can do about it. Take it up with corporate if you want to file a complaint." I watched him turn away, his attention already focused on a woman in an expensive business suit who was complaining loudly about her seat assignment. The casual dismissal stung more than I expected. After 4 decades of service, multiple deployments, and more nights spent in foxholes than 5-star hotels, I'd somehow expected that the uniform, even when it was just a faded cap and the invisible scars of service, would still mean something. That's when I saw him. A man in an expensive charcoal gray suit was cutting through the terminal like he owned it. And given the deference shown by every airport employee who crossed his path, maybe he did. Gold badge gleaming on his lapel. Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor with purposeful authority. Airport staff stepped aside automatically, heads nodding respectfully as he passed. The kind of man who made decisions that affected thousands of lives with a single phone call, who probably had senators on speed dial and CEOs seeking his advice. He was heading straight for our counter, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. The airline employee, his nameplate read Bradley Morrison, and he looked like he'd graduated from college maybe 6 months ago, straightened up immediately when he spotted the approaching figure. "Mr. Richardson, sir, I wasn't expecting you on the floor today. Is there something I can—" "Step aside, Bradley." Richardson's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that reminded me of the best commanding officers I'd served under. Men who didn't need to shout to be heard, whose presence alone could change the atmosphere in a room. Bradley practically melted into the background as this apparent CEO approached me directly, his expression shifting from business-focused to something deeper, more personal. I'd seen that look before. In the eyes of soldiers who'd been in the shit and lived to tell about it. Recognition, respect, and something else. Something that made him stop dead in his tracks when his gaze fell on the small patch on my cap. Without a word, without hesitation, This man in his $1,000 suit dropped to one knee in the middle of the terminal. "Sir," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space around us. "I am deeply, deeply sorry for what just happened here. I served with the 3rd Infantry Division in Iraq. Men like you, heroes like you, are the reason I'm alive today to stand in this terminal." The ambient noise of Terminal C seemed to fade into background static. Phones stopped pinging with notifications. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. 100 strangers, caught up in their own urgent travels. And personal dramas turned to watch as the CEO of what I now realized was a major airline knelt before an old soldier in a faded baseball cap. "Please," he continued, his voice thick with emotion that seemed to surprise even him. "Allow me to personally escort you to your seat. First class is where you belong, and I'll make damn sure you get the respect you've earned." That's when the applause started. Scattered at first, a businessman near the coffee cart, a mother holding a toddler by the departure board, then building like thunder rolling across a battlefield. Passengers put down their devices, their coffee cups, their newspapers. They stood up, all of them, as if pulled by some invisible force, and clapped for something they couldn't fully understand but instinctively recognized as important and rare. I felt tears I hadn't shed in decades burning behind my eyes. Not from embarrassment or gratitude, but from something deeper and more fundamental. Recognition. After all these years of feeling invisible, of watching the country move on while the wars continued, someone had remembered what the uniform meant, what the sacrifices had been for. Richardson stood slowly and extended his hand, his grip firm and warm. "The least I can do is upgrade you to our finest first-class suite. Full service, anything you need. And as for Bradley here..." His voice turned cold as he glanced at the young employee who was now looking distinctly pale. "He'll be transferred to our cargo handling division effective immediately. Clearly, he needs to learn what customer service actually means." As we walked through the terminal, Richardson beside me like an honor guard, I caught glimpses of other passengers pulling out their phones, recording the scene with the practiced ease of people who documented everything. By tomorrow morning, this would be everywhere. Social media feeds, news outlets, viral videos with millions of views and thousands of comments. The story of the airline CEO who remembered what honor looked like in an age when it seemed to be disappearing. "You didn't have to do that," I told him, as we approached the gate, passing a newsstand where CNN was playing silently on a mounted television, the Chiron reading something about congressional hearings and military budget cuts. "Yes, sir, I absolutely did." He paused in his stride, studying my face with the intense focus of someone reading a battlefield map under fire. "May I ask, what were you awarded the medal for?" The question I'd been asked 1,000 times over the years, and answered truthfully maybe 3 times. Most people wanted the Hollywood version, the sanitized story that fit neatly into their preconceptions about heroism and war. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2003. My unit was pinned down by Taliban forces. I went back for my men. It was more complicated than that, of course. It always was. The IED that had taken out our convoy on what should have been a routine supply run. The 18 hours we spent under concentrated enemy fire, watching our ammunition run low, while medevac helicopters were grounded by a sandstorm that seemed to last forever. The decision to leave cover, against direct orders from command, to drag 7 wounded soldiers to safety across 200 meters of open ground while machine gun fire chewed up the desert around us. The shrapnel that still shifted in my chest when the weather changed, a daily reminder of that long night when everything went wrong and somehow came out right. But Richardson understood what I wasn't saying. He'd been there himself, in different sand, under different fire, making the same impossible choices that defined who lived and who didn't make it home to their families. "How many did you save?" he asked quietly. "All of them." We'd reached the gate, where the boarding agent, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, looked up from her computer screen and immediately stood, straighter when she saw Richardson approaching with obvious purpose. Maria, he said to her with the easy familiarity of someone who knew his employees by name, this is Colonel Henry Danvers, Medal of Honor recipient. He'll be in Suite 1A, and anything he needs, anything at all, you make sure he gets it. This man is a national treasure. Of course, sir. Maria looked at me with the same mixture of respect and awe I'd seen in Richardson's eyes, but tempered with something more personal. Colonel, it would be my honor to personally ensure your comfort. During the flight, as Richardson prepared to leave, he turned back once more, his expression serious. Colonel, the country needs more men like you, now more than ever. I settled into the leather seat of Suite 1A, feeling the familiar weight of expectations and memories settling around me like an old coat. Through the small oval window, I watched the ground crew methodically prepare the plane for departure, their movements efficient and practiced in the way that only came from years of repetition. Soon I'd be airborne again, heading toward another ceremony, another chance to stand with other old soldiers and remember friends who never made it home from places whose names most Americans had already forgotten. The flight attendant, who introduced herself as Sarah, Maria's daughter, brought me coffee without being asked and quietly mentioned that her son was currently deployed with the 82nd Airborne in Syria. We talked about the desert, about the heat and the uncertainty, about the weight that young soldiers carried not just in their packs but in their hearts when they called home and tried to explain what they'd seen without frightening the people they loved most. As we lifted off, climbing steadily above the sprawling complexity of Washington, D.C., I thought about Richardson's parting words. The country needs more men like you. But as I watched the familiar landmarks shrink below us, the Pentagon, the Capitol Dome, the white monuments to dead presidents, I realized he was wrong about one fundamental thing. The country didn't need more men like me. It needed more men like him. People who remembered what honor looked like, who weren't afraid to take a knee when the moment called for it, who understood that respect wasn't automatically given based on position, but had to be earned through character and demonstrated through actions. The Medal of Honor around my neck wasn't heavy because of the metal it was made from. It was heavy because of the weight of representing something larger than myself, something that transcended individual recognition. Every day, in every interaction, I carried the responsibility of living up to what it meant, not just for me, but for every soldier who'd ever worn the uniform and never come home to receive thanks. Today, for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying that weight entirely alone. The plane banked left, heading toward whatever ceremony awaited me in Washington, but the real honor had already been given and received there in Terminal C, when one man chose to remember what service meant and acted accordingly. As the familiar landscape of Northern Virginia disappeared below us, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to think about the 7 men I'd pulled from that burning convoy in Helmand Province. They were grandfathers now, or should have been. Men with families and futures and problems that had nothing to do with insurgents or improvised explosive devices, living ordinary lives because of one decision made in the heat and chaos of combat. When everything else had gone to hell, Richardson understood that connection. Bradley, wherever they'd transferred him in the corporate hierarchy, probably never would. Sarah checked on me once more before we reached cruising altitude. "Colonel," she said quietly, leaning down so only I could hear. "My mom wanted me to tell you something. Her husband, my father, never made it back from Vietnam. She said to thank you for reminding her why his sacrifice mattered, why it's still important that people remember." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady, thinking about all the fathers and sons and daughters who'd made that same sacrifice, in different wars, different decades, for the same fundamental principles. Outside the window, America spread out below us in all its complexity. Cities and farmland, interstate highways and winding rivers, millions of people living their daily lives in the freedom they'd inherited but never had to fight for personally. That was the point, wasn't it? That they never had to know what it really cost, never had to make the choices that kept that freedom secure. But sometimes, like today, in the middle of an airport terminal, someone remembered, someone understood, someone took a knee and reminded the world that honor still existed, that sacrifice still mattered, that the uniform, even when it was just a faded cap and old scars, still meant something worth defending. The Medal of Honor felt lighter now. Not because its physical weight had changed, but because I was no longer carrying the burden of representation entirely alone. As we flew through clear skies toward Washington and whatever ceremony awaited, I finally understood what Richardson had really accomplished. He hadn't just upgraded my seat or publicly embarrassed a dismissive employee. He'd restored something I'd been losing without fully realizing it. Faith that the values I'd spent my life defending still lived in the hearts of people worth defending. Plane settled into its flight path, steady and sure, carrying me toward another day of service in a different form. But the real mission, the one that mattered most, had already been accomplished. In Terminal C, honor had been given and received, in equal measure, and for one old soldier, that recognition was enough to sustain him for whatever battles lay ahead. But as the flight attendant dimmed the cabin lights and passengers around me settled in for the journey ahead, something began to nag at the edges of my consciousness. Richardson's reaction had been almost too immediate, too perfectly choreographed. The way he'd appeared exactly when needed, the precision of his response, the calculated nature of his public apology, it felt less spontaneous than performed. I'd spent 40 years reading people and situations, identifying threats and opportunities in environments where the difference between the two could mean life or death. Something about the entire encounter felt orchestrated, like a carefully planned operation rather than a spontaneous moment of recognition. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Colonel, this is Richardson. Check your email when you land. There's something important you need to know about what happened today. About why you were really bumped from that seat." My blood went cold. With trembling fingers, I accessed my email through the plane's Wi-Fi, scrolling to find the most recent message. The subject line made my stomach drop. Operation Recognition, After Action Report. The message was brief but devastating. "Colonel Danvers, what happened today wasn't coincidence. Your treatment by that airline employee was supposed to be filmed and distributed widely, but for all the wrong reasons. Someone wanted to humiliate Medal of Honor recipients publicly, to show America that even our greatest heroes get no respect in the modern world. We couldn't let that happen. Richardson volunteered for the counter-operation. The respect he showed you was genuine, but the timing wasn't accidental. We've been watching. We've been protecting. Some battles are fought in boardrooms and terminals. Now, not just on traditional battlefields. Welcome to the new war, Colonel. The enemy has evolved, and so have we. A friend." The spacious first-class cabin suddenly felt claustrophobic, the recycled air thin and insufficient. I looked around with new eyes, studying my fellow passengers with the paranoid attention I'd once reserved for crowded bazaars in hostile territory. The businessman typing on his laptop 3 rows up. Was he documenting something or just working? The couple taking selfies near the window. Tourists or surveillance? Sarah appeared beside my seat, her expression concerned. "Colonel, you look pale. Are you feeling all right? Can I get you anything?" I studied her face carefully, searching for tells, for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. "Sarah, you mentioned your father died in Vietnam. What was his name?" She hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it, the tiny pause that every interrogator learns to recognize. James Morrison." I pulled out my phone and conducted a quick search of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial database. The records were comprehensive, digitized, searchable. If James Morrison from her hometown had died in Vietnam, he would be there among the 58,000 names, carved in black granite. No James Morrison from Arlington, Virginia, had died in Southeast Asia. "Sarah," I said quietly, my voice carrying the authority that had once commanded respect from hardened combat veterans. "Who do you really work for?" Her kind eyes hardened almost imperceptibly, the maternal warmth replaced by something more professional and calculating. "Colonel, I think you should try to get some rest. It's been a very long day for you." But I was already putting the pieces together with the methodical precision that had kept me alive through multiple deployments. The convenient timing of Bradley's dismissive treatment, Richardson's perfectly orchestrated response, the passengers, who had applauded and filmed everything with their phones, Sarah's fabricated story about her non-existent father. I wasn't a victim of disrespect who had been rescued by corporate decency. I was a prop in someone's carefully staged production, a symbol being manipulated for purposes I didn't understand, but was beginning to fear. The realization hit me like shrapnel. I hadn't been honored. I'd been used. Someone had tried to weaponize my story, my service, my pain. First as an example of American ingratitude, then as proof of American respect. They'd succeeded, but not in the way anyone had planned, because now I understood what I was really fighting against. The country didn't need more men like Richardson. It needed fewer people who thought honor could be manufactured for public consumption, that respect could be scripted for social media, that the sacrifices of real soldiers could be used as chess pieces in whatever information war they were playing. The C. Medal of Honor around my neck felt heavy again. But this time it wasn't the weight of representation or responsibility. It was the weight of being reduced to a symbol, a prop in someone else's narrative about what America should be. As the plane flew through the darkness toward Washington, I realized that the ceremony tomorrow would be different now. Not because I'd been honored by an airline CEO in front of viral video cameras, but because I finally understood what I was really fighting for in this new kind of warfare where truth itself had become a casualty. The honor wasn't in the recognition, whether genuine or manufactured. It was in refusing to be anyone's symbol except my own, in maintaining the integrity of service even when others tried to exploit it for their own purposes. The war had followed me home after all. It just looked different than I'd expected.